as he answered. His mother frantically urged him to head to Hanyang Airport to attend the funeral. In that moment, time seemed to stand still. After 600 years, he could hear his mother's voice again. Li Sufang, his mother, was born into the prestigious Li family, one of the 6 major clans in Yanqin. She had been disowned for marrying an ordinary man, his father. His parents had struggled to make ends meet on their own, and within the Li family, he had always been treated as an outsider, looked down upon by all. Chen Mo had once been used as a pawn in a political marriage with the Yu family, only to have the engagement annulled later. However, despite everything, his mother had silently supported him. Now, with his second chance at life, Chen Mo vowed to settle all scores, both old and new. At the airport, his mother, Li Sufang, was already waiting. Seeing her after 600 years, Chen Mo could barely contain his emotions but reminded himself not to cry. Approaching her, he forced a cheerful demeanor, making a few teasing remarks. Li Sufang reminded him to bow deeply to his grandmother when they reached Yanqin. Outwardly, he nodded casually, but inside, he was already devising a plan. His visit to Yanqin was solely to unleash his long-suppressed fury. After a few hours of flying, they arrived in Yanqin's outskirts, where the Li family estate was located, a bustling city with towering skyscrapers. Upon landing, they still had a short drive to reach the funeral. When they arrived, the Li family's butler appeared visibly uneasy at Li Sufang's presence. He questioned why she had come. Noting his reaction, Chen Mo understood that the Li family did not welcome them. Li Sufang retorted, "Why shouldn't I bid my mother farewell?" The butler, who had no authority, merely warned her of potential obstacles. Unfazed, Li Sufang held Chen Mo's hand firmly and entered the estate. In his past life, he had been intimidated by the hostile stares of the family, bowing his head in submission. But now, to Chen Mo, the Li family were nothing more than ants. Inside, the head of the Li family, Li Dongyang, sat before the coffin with an imposing demeanor, but showed no trace of sorrow. Upon Li Sufang's arrival, Li Luan immediately questioned her presence. She simply responded, "If you still see me as your sister, don't ask such questions." Both Li Luan and Li Lidu expressed displeasure but held their tongues. Then, Sufang's eldest brother invited her to pay her last respects to their mother, but stopped Chen Mo from entering. Sufang protested, declaring, "Chen Mo is my son, not an outsider." She pointed out the hypocrisy, as the 3 sons and 1 daughter of Li Lidu were also technically outsiders. In response, they argued that Chen Mo had not been officially registered in the family, making him ineligible for exceptions. Sufang's fury was palpable, but she restrained herself out of respect for her eldest brother's wishes. She had no choice but to instruct Chen Mo to stay outside and pay his respects from there. Chen Mo bowed deeply, honoring his grandmother despite the Li family's murmurs and stares. Later that night, one of his cousins insisted Chen Mo could not stay with his mother. Although he initially refused, the cousin persisted, leaving Chen Mo no choice but to agree. He reassured his mother with a smile and followed his cousin, knowing full well they intended to house him in the storage shed. In his past life, he had been locked in this same shed and nearly beaten to death. After walking a short distance, the cousin smugly informed Chen Mo that this was where he would be staying, tossing the keys on the ground. Chen Mo asked if their family was so poor they housed guests in storage sheds. Without hesitation, his cousin replied, "Letting you stay here is already a privilege." He then left, laughing. Chen Mo raised 2 fingers, using his power to levitate the key without bending down to pick it up. Later that night, a group quietly approached the shed, equipped with a spare key. Upon entering, they froze in shock, seeing Chen Mo calmly sitting on a chair, asking, "What do you want?" Hearing his question, they responded, "We're here to teach you the consequences of coming here." As soon as the green-haired leader gave the order, 2 men charged at Chen Mo, instructed not to kill him but to rough him up. Chen Mo remained seated, unflinching, until the 2 men approached. With a single punch and a kick, they were knocked to the ground. Standing up slowly, Chen Mo dusted off his clothes. The green-haired leader, unfazed, exuded power, declaring he would show Chen Mo what true strength looked like. Chen Mo looked at him, initially thinking it was spiritual power, but realizing it was too weak, barely qualifying as spiritual energy. He was surprised and wondered, could there still be cultivators on Earth today? Levy's subordinates, after being beaten and witnessing his display of power, immediately stood up to flatter and praise him. Just a trace of spiritual energy was enough for these people to see him as a true martial artist. Before Chen Mo had time to prepare, Levy smugly swung his fist to attack. However, Chen Mo remained unfazed. He calmly raised his hand to block, dispersing the spiritual energy around them. By the time Levy realized something was wrong, it was too late. Chen Mo grabbed his hand and slammed him hard into the ground, causing him to vomit blood. Stepping on him, Chen Mo scornfully said, "Is this what you call strength?" Levy's subordinates screamed and begged Chen Mo to let him go. Chen Mo nodded in agreement, but before releasing him, delivered a kick to Levy's stomach, leaving him clutching his abdomen in pain. His dantian was crippled, making further cultivation impossible. This made Levy hate Chen Mo to the core, vowing, "Even as a ghost, I won't forgive you." But to Chen Mo, such words were meaningless. The fun was only just beginning. A while later, at the Li family mansion, Levy's parents brought their injured son, crying and pleading with Li Dongyang. When asked, Levy's father immediately said, "Chen Mo crippled my son's dantian." Upon hearing this, Li Dongyang angrily shouted and ordered Li Lidu, "Bring Chen Mo and Li Sufang here immediately." However, before they could leave, Chen Mo's voice rang out from outside. He confidently entered, demanding that they leave his mother alone. Seeing Chen Mo, the Li family members gritted their teeth, wishing they could tear him apart. To them, Chen Mo was nothing less than an enemy. Levy's mother immediately questioned him, but Chen Mo remained silent. At this point, Li Dongyang coldly ordered, "Kneel." Chen Mo smiled faintly and refused, further enraging Li Dongyang, who shouted louder. Only then did Chen Mo respond, "All my life, I've lived upright before heaven and earth. Why should I kneel?" Hearing this, everyone around thought he was too arrogant and disrespectful to his elders, growing even angrier. Levy's father shouted, calling him an animal, accusing him of being a member of the Li family who had brutally attacked his cousin and refusing to admit his wrongdoing. Chen Mo retorted, "What do you mean? Only now do you consider me a Li family member?" With nothing more to say, Levy's father turned to beg Li Dongyang, adding numerous accusations against Chen Mo. Li Dongyang decided to use family law. Chen Mo's aunt was deeply worried, fearing he would be expelled from the Li family in disgrace. Levy's parents, however, were gleeful, thinking Chen Mo deserved such a fate. Just then, Li Zufang intervened, saying there must be a misunderstanding. "Chen Mo is not a cruel person," she insisted, but the others refused to listen, pointing to the bloodied Levy as evidence. Even Li Sufang was puzzled and turned to ask Chen Mo for an explanation. Chen Mo thought it unnecessary, believing these people would never believe him. Nonetheless, Li Zufang demanded he speak to clarify things. Left with no choice, Chen Mo complied, also wanting his mother to see the true nature of these people. He then grabbed one of Levy's subordinates, slamming him to the ground. This sight further displeased Li Dongyang, but he remained silent, watching. Chen Mo stared intently at the man, who was terrified. Under Chen Mo's intimidating gaze, he ordered the man to tell the truth without lying. Too scared to lie, the man revealed everything. It was all Levy's doing. He wanted to teach Chen Mo a lesson to deter the shameless woman, Li Zufang, from ever coming to the Li family again. His account shocked everyone, including details of how Levy arranged for Chen Mo to stay in a storage room and later brought armed men, intending to beat Chen Mo as long as he didn't die. Despite using all his strength, Levy was ultimately defeated. Hearing this, Li Zufang was furious and confronted Levy's parents, her own brother and sister-in-law. However, even with the truth laid bare, they stubbornly accused Chen Mo of being overly cruel. They even justified Levy, calling her a shameless woman, citing past events. After a heated argument, Levy's parents turned to Li Dongyang, begging him to enforce family law against Chen Mo. Chen Mo said nothing, simply waiting for his grandfather's response to see how he would handle the situation. After a moment of silence, Li Dongyang unexpectedly declared no action would be taken. His reasoning: Chen Mo is not a member of the Li family. The life and death of an outsider are not worth enforcing family law. Upon hearing this, Li Sufang completely lost faith in the family. If family law won't be used, then how will you deal with this? She asked. Li Dongyang firmly replied, a blood debt must be repaid in blood. He ordered Chen Mo's imprisonment to wait for Li Bi to recover before taking further action. When Li Sufang asked, what if I disagree? Li Dongyang, confident in his authority, raised his hand to strike her. However, Chen Mo intercepted him. The surrounding people cursed Chen Mo in unison, while Li Lidu drew a gun to threaten him. Seeing the tense situation, Li Sufang urged Chen Mo to let go. But at that moment, Chen Mo was distracted by something. Two elderly men appeared behind Li Dongyang, exuding a strange and threatening aura. Clearly, this powerful family wasn't simple. However, the dignity of a great cultivator in the nascent soul stage could not be violated. In his past life, Chen Mo was powerless. In this life, he refused to let his mother suffer humiliation. He told Li Dongyang, if you have an issue, come at me. Leave my mother out of this. Otherwise, I will make the Li family change hands today. With that, he unleashed a burst of power that stunned Li Lidu, who was holding the gun. No one expected Chen Mo to be an inner-stage martial artist. Li Dongyang also sensed the danger, sweating nervously. At such a close distance, no one could stop Chen Mo from killing him. Only Li Sufang seemed oblivious to what was happening. After a while, Chen Mo's aunt spoke, urging him not to be disrespectful to his grandfather. Chen Mo retorted, where was my grandfather when my mother was humiliated at my birth? Where was he when Levi brought men to beat me?